Hi folks, welcome to another exciting Third World Garage video. This one dealing with Soviet electronics, specifically this Geiger counter, which originally came from Ukraine. Now, my suspicion, because it was from 1991, is that this thing was actually originally a surplus unit destined for Chernobyl, which is not out of the realm of possibility. And for those of you who are interested in the wiring diagram and can read Russian, or just understand the normal code and such, here is the wiring diagram to look at. You can pause the video at some time if you need to. Let me see. Nope. And here are all of the values. Once again, they are in Russian. But let's get down to the teardown. First off, we'll talk a little bit about the functionality of this. This is the whatever that is 5B. Sometimes in English it's called the DP-5B or DP-5V. It's basic Geiger counter, but it's actually kind of a neat one because it includes a high range and a low range tube, which we'll get into in a few minutes in this probe. The probe itself has this beta shield, and right here, inside that, emitting nothing through the metal because it's a pure beta emitter, is some strontium-90, which has decayed, about half of which is decayed by this point, to yttrium-90. And what you would do is you have three positions. That position right there, you would have, I have no idea. Okay. Right here is, if you have your beta shield open, beta shield closed, and test source. There we go. So, and it's all in Cyrillic writing, so I don't really know how to pronounce those letters. Now, on the bottom, we have this here, which is our battery cover. And we're going to be taking the batteries out. We'll talk about the batteries for a minute first. Yeah, we will be actually doing a complete teardown of this unit today. Take a look on the inside and see what it's all about. These are very common in former Soviet bloc countries, but less common in the United States, where we have things like the CDV-700 or numerous good civilian models. Now, this battery right here is going to deal with the backlight, whereas these two are going to run the actual Geiger counter itself. Now, despite the fact that this does use a 380 volt source that's stepped up through a transformer to go to the probe to create the potential across the tubes, it actually draws very little current. And it can go a very long time on just a few batteries, which is good because in an actual nuclear emergency, which hopefully we will never see, I gotta make sure I note that, you don't want to find that. And it's important to note that Soviet batteries are oriented, I believe, kind of opposite of an American or European battery. So looking from this side with the probe like this, we have a positive facing this end, positive on this end, positive on that end. It's important that you do not mix them up. Okay, actually, printed correctly. Or maybe it isn't, and I just marked the batteries correctly. It'd be nice if I actually knew that. But here we have some seals, which I kind of don't want to break. But we'll get back to that in a minute. And right here you have your battery test, and the 200 Röntgen level, and then the X100, X1000, X100, X10, X1, X.01. And right there is a zeroing button. Right there is the light switch. And there's the meter. Meter is actually really nicely made. It's very nicely damped. But this is not, because of that, this is not as accurate at lower readings than a CDV-700, which it will oscillate a lot more because of just the design of the circuitry. This is actually, it's more accurate a little bit higher up, but at very, very light voltages, it's not. We're going to use this Soviet-made screwdriver that comes with the kit. Now, the interesting thing that the Soviets loved to do with everything that they made was they loved to make their things run off of as few tools as possible. They've also seen, if you are in a country outside the United States, in Western Europe, that got Ladas. Lada cars, like the 2101, the 2105, 2107, etc., also called the Lada Riva, they're based very heavily on the old Fiat 124, but the Soviets actually, they went in and re-engineered them. They're made of thicker metal, and they went in and they reduced the number of different kind of fasteners. But then they supplied the driver, or the vehicle, with a complete toolkit that went with each car. They also supplied them with a hand crank starting handle. So even into the 80s, and I think the 90s as well, those cars could be hand crank started, which is very vital if you're in somewhere in Siberia and you kind of have to get home and your battery dies, which I guess wasn't that uncommon given the state of the Soviet Union. Well, and Soviet consumer engineering, which always left a little bit, or a lot bit desired. We take those 4 screws out. These 2 screws here are just for holding the extension handle. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to pull this out carefully, and then we can see the circuit board and the tubes. This is an STS-5 Geiger-Müller tube, and this one here, can't remember the name of it, but this is the very high-range tube, which this does the same thing that the American survey meter would have done, the CDV-715. So actually they have both instruments in one instrument. You can see here we have the 2 electrometer tubes, as well as some resistors. There's a capacitor, another, is it a resistor? Yeah, resistor. They seem to have kept the standard markings, which C standing for capacitor, R for resistor, that everybody else in the world used. And that is a TX4 whatever that is in Russian electrometer tube, and they're both the same tube. But we're not going to take this apart any further, but you can see it's actually nicely designed. It's got this little rubber seal, and it does come with a complete set of all rubber seals in the kit when you buy one of these. And it is nicely sealed, nicely put together. I really do like the design of this piece. It's not a beautiful design to look at in this clunky green color, but it is very well made. And it looks like it's a glass fiber reinforced plastic of some sort. So probably like a nylon, like what AVE always talks about the PA6 nylon glass fiber reinforcement. What percentage, I don't know, and I'm not going to try to burn it to find out, because this is kind of a piece of history. And I wanted to do a good English language, native English speaker version of a review of this, because there really aren't that many of them available on YouTube. So hopefully this helps somebody out who's maybe considering one of these Geiger counters. You're preparing for nuclear apocalypse, or you just find them or you're like me and you just kind of find this sort of thing interesting. That you can measure all of these unseen nuclear forces with something that you can get as military surplus from, well, like this one came actually out of Ukraine during the Ukrainian-Russian civil war there. I guess there's kind of no way around it. I'm going to have to grab a pick, and I'm going to have to poke that out. Or I'll just use an Apple screwdriver. But what's interesting is that this is like almost like a gum-like substance. This one says number 2 on it. Okay, and there's 2 of these holding it in. I'm guessing that's because of the calibration, and to make sure that it wasn't tampered with by someone of a member of the proletariat, sent to the gulag or whatever. Actually, by the time this was made, they got rid of the gulag. They just, put you in psychiatric care and gave you very painful treatments until you agreed with them that socialism was superior. And that is after the Khrushchev thaw, of course. Before that, it was just forced labor to you until you were dead. Needless to say, I'm not a huge fan of communism, because communism kind of sucks, except unless you're the one at the top. Problem is, you're not getting away from working for a corporation, because your entire country is one big giant corporation. And that's communism. And they own your ass. And everything you have is theirs. That's why the Chinese want you to have to do so much business with their own people, because then they own any property that you share. But here we go. We got 2 light bulbs, the meter, and then it's actually a really large meter movement. And then you've got this switch here. It looks like it's got a lot of different... I'm trying not to touch that with metal, so I'll go here. And here we have our calibration for all 8 different possibilities on the front. I would almost say it's a piezo, but it's not, because this doesn't have a sounder. It comes with its own earphones. And here is a little electrometer tube. And underneath, we'll look at that circuit board, but we're not actually going to take this completely apart. Out of respect for the fact that it cost me $150. Took me forever to get from Ukraine. So let's take a look, see if I see any leaky capacitors, any bulge capacitors. A little piece of solder came out of it. That's not encouraging. And yeah, that is the inside of the Soviet DP-5B or DP-5V Geiger counter. You can see actually the meter says 1990 right down there. And that there, that's not plastic, that's glass. The same thing with that. It's a really thick plastic housing with good seals done on it. So this thing could probably actually get wet and not get water inside. Even the twist switch does have its own seal on it. Really nicely made. Ugly, but beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and in this case of the function. And I think that the function is absolutely gorgeous on these. See, it's still got all its original red paint on it and the cream paint that keeps you from... That's kind of a tamper evident thing for the calibration. I have actually tested this versus other Geiger counters I have, and even after 30 years, or almost 30 years, 29 years, this thing is pretty close. The standard on a Geiger counter is usually right about, should be within 10% ballpark on most of these meters. If you can get it, if it's within 10%, you're considered golden, because with radiation, it's not always going to be a constant. And you're just trying to get a ballpark measurement anyway, especially when you're dealing with something like a Geiger counter and not a scintillation detector. Those are a bit more accurate, and that's indexed. An interesting way they indexed it too. The metal tab hitting the flat part of the D for indexing. Okay, don't make a liar out of me. See, that's how that's got to go in. Let's make sure we have it started. Put that in there. And anyway, I won't bore you with putting it back together, but for those of you who wondered what's inside a Soviet Geiger counter that would have been used at Chernobyl, well, there it is. And thank you very much. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I am trying to hit that magic
20 subscriber level, and I just need 3 more people to subscribe. So if you subscribe now, you'll help me hit 20. And then I'm on my way to 1,000 and monetization, where I can do much more interesting stuff. Anyways, make sure you leave a comment below, and thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.